Morning, everyone. Fine greetings from Friday morning. I'd just like to welcome all of you to this webinar, and basically it is the midterm evaluation of the Centres of Specialisation Workshop. I'll be your chair. My name is Seamus Needham, and I'm part of a project team that is managing a 5-year TVET research program in partnership with the Department of Higher Education and Training and the National Skills Fund. This particular project, which was the midterm evaluation of the Centres of Specialisation, is actually one of the research projects. I'd like to extend a special welcome to the Deputy Director General, Mr. Sam Zungu, for being in attendance, and hope that all protocol is observed.
Indeed, I think all of us colleagues will agree with me that TVET colleges are indeed at the epicenter of the provisioning of the entry and the midterm skills that the country so desperately need in trying to provide a solution or a response in what we call the triple challenges that we find ourselves faced with, that of inequality, poverty, and unemployment. I think the recent statistics have shown in terms of the growth in the youth unemployment. And I think as a department, we have to provide a response to that. And the only response we can provide as Department of Higher Education and Training, particularly the TVET branch, is to find ways or means of providing skills programs that will probably respond in those challenges. And I think this exercise and this evaluation is part of providing that dashboard to say, here's a pilot that we have started as a department. How are we doing? Are we yielding the results or the desired results that we set ourselves from the beginning? And for me, given my background as a former college principal, I think when the concept of Centres of Specialisation was presented, I said, wow, this is one solution that we needed as TVET colleges. In fact, if it was for me, we would have just started without even piloting and just rolling out. But you know, the reality of project of such nature and of such magnitude, we have to make sure that you start somewhere and then build on all the gaps that you might have identified along the way. So I think this evaluation is going to assist us to give more or less the picture of where we are, whether there's been any impact in terms of the rollout of this program. But from where I stand, I have been listening also to some of the colleagues from the colleges to say, we wish all of us were now operating on that model. Remember, this is one model that is assisting us to get closer to industry, to get closer to our stakeholders and understand their needs in terms of the requirements of the skills that are required in this field. So I think on that note, colleagues, let me once again welcome all of you to this webinar, and I wish everything of the best, and I hope everything will go well. At the end, we will have to hear the findings of the study and then see how we take this process going forward.
Good morning to the DDG and ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us for the presentation on the findings of this midterm evaluation today. Just a brief overview in terms of what we're going to cover. The DDG has gone through the background of the COS program, so I won't labor that too much. I'll just add on some of the key differences in terms of how the COS program differs from the traditional approach of TVET college training. We'll talk at a very high level through the theory of change of this program and how we see our inputs and activities ultimately leading to the change that we'd like to see. And then we'll talk through the findings of the evaluation. And this is in 3 specific categories. So we looked at relevance and appropriateness of the program. We looked at the efficiency of implementation, and we looked at what sort of effectiveness we have seen to date. And each of these will be defined as we go along. what we know is that South Africa has embarked on a development journey to economic growth, and this is to address our triple challenges, and as mentioned by the DDG. But in order for us to actually get this right and for us to achieve this goal, we need a skilled workforce. That is the central pillar behind us actually achieving that. However, we know from research that South Africa has a significant mismatch between the skills needed in the economy to achieve this objective, this growth objective, and the skills that are currently available in the labor market. And to overcome this, we see government and stakeholders actually making a deliberate and concerted effort to design and implement strategies that aim to coordinate skills development. It's that coordination of skills development that is very important to ensure that the skills that are delivered are fit for purpose and relevant. So this is why we're here today. As the DGG mentioned, we did a midterm evaluation of the Centre of Specialisation Programme, and the objective of this was to actually see where we are to date. What progress have we made? What lessons have we learned? And we did this by looking at the relevance and appropriateness of the programme, whether it's answering the right questions, whether it's been correctly designed to answer those problems, whether the programs are on track, what problems have we identified, where do we need to take corrective action, etc. And the overall objective was for us to inform the adjustments to the program for both the current cohort as well as future rollouts. And in order to address these, we have set ourselves 6 immediate outcomes that we need to achieve from this program. And these are the 6 purple blocks that are circled by this broken line or this dashed line. Very importantly, usually when you see a program, you'll see activities and outputs as well. But given the number of stakeholders that are involved in this program, there was a decision taken to give some level of freedom and flexibility to people who are actually implementing these programs and structures who are implementing these programs to do it in the way that they feel best, but also with some guidance from the oversight and management structures, which is why you won't see activities and outputs at this level. You'll be rather focused on the immediate outcomes. And these 6 immediate outcomes are quite important because they are the way that all the findings from the evaluation have been categorized. So the first immediate outcome that we were looking for was to make sure that we got the appropriate regulatory governance, funding, and management structures in place. As we mentioned, there's quite a number of different stakeholders. It's very important for us to make sure we have the structures right before we can actually get the program to work the way that we want. The second one is around learning and teaching and support materials. Because we changed the way that the program runs or works or is delivered from the traditional TVET system, there was a need for us to now have appropriate LTSMs for these particular trades. And that was the second thing that we needed to put in place. The third thing we needed to put in place was we needed to help TVET colleges to increase their capacity. And by capacity, we're talking about resources, we're talking about quality, etc. We needed to get them up to scratch. And the fourth one is that we needed employers to come to the party. We know that this is a dual system approach, which means that we not only need the college, you also need the employers. So were we able to, with this program, actually get employers on board, and are they able to adequately train apprentices? The fifth one is around SETAs being able to participate in the Centre of Specialisation. Your SETAs are very important in this space because they play a number of roles. They are part funder, in terms of the stipends that are paid to the employer for the apprentice. They are also important for workplace approvals, etc. And then the very last outcome that we needed to achieve is that we needed to have effective and efficient trade test centers, because as we said, this entire program culminates with the ASA, the External Integrated Summative Assessment, and for that you need an accredited trade test center. So these are the 6 things that we needed to do in order to get this program to work. If we can get these things in place, we expect that those apprentices that come out will have better knowledge and skills, they'll have better employability, they may go through the system faster, our TVET colleges will, our entire system actually, will be better placed to deliver apprenticeship training, and even our collaboration and coordination between all our different stakeholders would have improved. So I won't go through this in a lot more. I will talk to these 6 purple blocks as we go through the evaluation findings. The first thing is that, or the first need or the challenge that we need to address with this program is that there's a shortage of supply in the supply of suitably skilled and qualified artisans into the labor market. Well, in the NDP, we put out a target for 30,000 per year. We are we are actually falling short of that number, but that doesn't talk to the suitably qualified component of that. So not only are we below that, the quality of those artisans may not be up to scratch. And when we looked at the SIPs, as we said earlier, we did some research, we found that there were these gaps, and that is why we know that there is a shortage in supply. But what are the other two reasons that cause the shortage in supply? The first one is the poor quality of apprenticeship training and the resulting lower level of skill and competence of the artisan. If your quality of training is not up to scratch, because the resulting apprentices that come through the program are seen to have a lower level of skill and competence, they're not as employable, or they're not seen to be as employable. And what are some of the reasons for this? They touch on that traditional approach that we talked about earlier, where we're looking at outdated curricula or curricula that are not aligned to industry needs, poor quality or inadequate infrastructure at TVET colleges to actually deliver apprenticeship training, uneven levels of trade expertise amongst teachers within the TVET colleges, and also little to no on-the-job learning exposure. But that's only one part of the challenge. The other part of the challenge is systemic weaknesses. And these are broader than just the TVET college. This is all the other aspects that we need to work in order for the COS program to be effective. And this also ties back into those 6 purple blocks in the theory of change. So what are some of these systemic weaknesses? The first one is a fragmented trade qualifications with no national oversight or coordination for a single trade. We know that some qualifications used to be overseen by the SETAs, which means that different SETAs would have different ways of doing things. We have weak monitoring and quality assurance of apprenticeship programs. As we said, not all programs were linked to competence, which meant that the quality assurance component wasn't as strong. We know that there were complicated registration systems for apprentices, leading to delays and employer frustrations, because the employer needs to register that apprentice and then go through a number of different administration requirements that could often lead to frustration. So the first finding that we have under this is that there appears to be a slight disconnect between some of the parties who are participating in the COS program. And we will talk about this more and more as we go through the slides, because we do have a section for each of the different key stakeholders. But the key here is that our governance and management structures are established and they are operational. And this is at an oversight level and at a college level. But there are some challenges. We do feel, or we do see from the evaluation, that the governance structures sometimes are a bit too large. And when you have too many players, it makes collaboration and coordination very, very difficult. We do see that there are some stakeholders who have not allocated dedicated resources to this particular program. And the dedicated resources is important because for continuity, if you don't have dedicated resources and you have different people coming to meetings every month, it makes that continuity throughout the program quite difficult. The second finding that we have under this immediate outcome is around the funding. So we have developed funding frameworks for all 13 trades, and for the pilot phase, which is the first cohort, the funding came from appropriations from the TVET branch. It came from a skills development levy from the National Skills Fund, as well as from the SETAs who provided the funding to the employers, as we mentioned. But as I mentioned earlier, the importance of learning and teaching materials comes from the fact that we've made changes from the old approach. We've changed our curriculum to be more industry relevant. And because we did that, we needed to make sure that the learning and teaching material that's used in the TVET colleges by the facilitators, by the learners, and even in the workplace by the mentors was also updated. And we found that for some of the trades, this still hadn't yet been done. The next outcome that we have is around capacity of TVET colleges to produce the artisans. And what we found over here is the key finding was that these 19 TVET colleges and 26 sites have been inducted into the Centre of Specialisation Programme, and they are participating. The quality of participation, however, is driven by the executive structure of your college. If you have good buy-in from your executive structure of your college, chances are that your Centre of Specialisation is going to succeed. We found less challenges in those colleges which had good executive buy-in and commitment. The fifth outcome is around SETAs, and there was one main overall finding that we found with regard to the SETAs and their participation in the COS. And this comes back to that very first slide that we did about the institutional framework, where we said that not enough consideration has been given to the autonomous nature of some organizations. And this comes through because when we look at the way that SETAs are participating in the Centre of Specialisation Programme, and again, there are some SETAs that have done well, and there are others that have done poorly, but we are just focusing on the overall findings. We find it's a fragmented landscape, very levels of commitment, inconsistent processes and criteria for workplace approvals, and even for grant funding applications and disbursement. There's different ways that different SETAs do things, and this has created quite a lot of confusion to credit them and then use them as the trade test centers. But this has been found to be unfeasible simply because these existing trade test centers don't actually have the specialized equipment. Again, these are centers of specialization. So they don't actually have the specialized infrastructure, equipment, and tools that are needed. So for us to use those trade test centers would be very, very difficult. And now there's discussions being held and consideration is being given to actually accredit the Center of Specialization at the TVET College itself. That workshop has been built. The capital expenditure has been put out. And then to avoid any conflicts of interest or any challenges that could arise, to then have independent assessors come in, use the same infrastructure, but have an independent assessor.
Just emphasize the exercise we're going to do now is anonymous. So whatever you're going to represent or respond to will not be attributed to your name or your constituency. So do not be concerned. It's a completely anonymous exercise. It just gives us a little bit of a sense before we go into the panel session that Gerda will be chairing in a few minutes. It helps us just to get a sense what the views of people that are on the call now. Not looking too bad on capacity. It's a key part of our sector and the work that we need to do at the moment. It's interesting, stakeholder collaboration came out in the findings as something that needed a bit more work. So it's interesting that it's actually one of the highest from the group today. Okay, but very interesting. Okay, let's do one more. There's seven key recommendations from the report that Zoe presented. We're asking you to rank these recommendations in your view. It helps DHET as it goes forward with the COS program, with colleges, employers, and SETAs, to get a sense from you as a community which of these are the most important for you. This is a bit more of a delicate exercise if you're doing it on your phone. Give us a sense by prioritizing these recommendations, and it's really important for us to see from the group. Just a reminder, anybody who still wants to join, like a last chance, right at the top, I feel like auctioning something. Right at the top, there's a URL and a code if you still want to join us. Okay, very interesting. Actually, I wasn't expecting this, to be honest. Okay. I'm just going to give another 30 seconds or so if anybody still hasn't submitted. But I think this is quite interesting results. And I mean, Gerda, Mustak, I think for your panel, this is going to be an interesting entry into your panel. Okay, colleagues, a last question. And this is really looking at the future of the COS program. Before we finish today, Sabela is going to talk about this just before we finish at 12 o'clock. So the 4 points are on the future. The dual system methodology is just like working, and we need to really push it in. Do you agree? The role clarity of the dual system methodology in particular. So firstly, is it a preferred model? And secondly, is the role clarity there? And then the third one on the OTCs, they're working, they must be retained. And then just the last point, just a general point, do you support this? And do you think it's something that DHET must take forward?
So we are going to have a little bit of a conversation about some of the findings that has just been presented. Of course, we can't go into everything, but I'll pick on a few issues and ask a couple of questions, and let's get some of the views and perspectives of our panel members.
From my side, I would really welcome the report and appreciate the findings and recommendations that have been made in it. And let me say, it's not often that you get a very frank and detailed report to the extent that we've received this midterm review, even with all of its challenges. So, welcome that. And then just go on to say, maybe in a general sense, that I'm speaking to you this morning when the South African unemployment rate at the moment is running well in excess, I think, of 34.5 or 35, closer to 35. And if you look at the expanded definition, then you're looking at running at more at 44% unemployment. And let's not even go to look at the youth between the age of 15 and 24, because that's sitting closer towards, 65, between 65 and 70% in terms of unemployed. So, to say that we have a youth unemployment crisis is an understatement.
I'll be sharing a perspective from a TVET college in Newcastle, Majuba College, that is participating in the boiler making COS. In our view, the review will assist in informing the policy direction in occupational programs. Also, challenges and bottlenecks identified that will impede on effective and efficient implementation will be addressed. Coming from a TVET college myself, I know that our colleges are not seen to be fully responsive to the skill shortages required by the economy. Whilst there is pockets of excellence observed in some of our TVET colleges, the reality out there is that some of our youth still do not recognize our colleges as their first choice. So this midterm review provides a constructive opinion on how the COS program has performed thus far in preparation for possible expansion of the project.
I think, looking at the report, it's highlighting the key issues that we really need to think of when we talk of the decade of the artisan objectives, because, with the SETAs taking over from the industry training boards, somehow the introduction of learnerships, put the advocacy on learnerships, and people thought of apprenticeships are going to die, and therefore the intake also dwindled. And however, it was purely because of how the learnerships advocacy was pushed, and it therefore, fortunately, from SETA's perspective, we still continued with the advocacy of apprenticeships in order to get our artisans. What went wrong, in terms of poor quality of apprenticeships? We found a lot of what we call recognition of prior learning, people coming into the artisan development field to a point where the quality then sort of dropped because people felt from their own experience, therefore they do qualify for recognition as artisans.
In general, in general way forward, what we are starting to do is that we had national oversight structure and some work stream, and then we are collapsing, as I've indicated, we are collapsing some of the, so that some of the activities are taken to our monthly occupational team convener meeting, and we report this to the executive committee of the Centres of Specialisation. So some of the structures have been reduced, and we hope that we'll start getting more efficient, because at times some of the committees were a bit bulky and then lack in terms of efficiency. Reliance on OTC, I can't emphasize that more. It has been indicated that they've played a critical role in terms of ensuring that we are able to deliver the Centres of Specialisation. But we need to start to ensure that some of the role of the occupational team conveners are slightly transferred to the college project managers, so that we build capacity of the college project managers. They work closely with occupational team conveners so that we are able to, in a longer term, achieve sustainability. So that's the area that we're also doing. Funding model, program funding at TVET is being reviewed. So it's part of the area that we have been looking at. So we are currently reviewing the funding model, and there's been inclusion of the Centres of Specialisation on the funding grid of the TVET college. So now TVET college are able to plan ahead and say, this is the number of apprentices that we are planning to take for 2022, acknowledging the role of the workplace, that we can't just take apprentices without a workplace. So the workplace funding remains the responsibility of the SETAs, but we are also engaging with the skills branch so that we include the COS planning on the service level agreement of the SETA. In that way, it will make it easier so that we don't approach SETA by SETA, but we can just approach it from the service level agreement if we work closer with the skills branch.
No, thanks, Chairperson of the session, Dr. Niam. Really appreciate the way you have conducted the session. Very progressive indeed. Also, the interesting engagements that we have had with our panelists, very insightful. And all the inputs that we have received through the chat. Let me thank everyone that have participated in this webinar. Indeed, we have seen the presentation by Ms. Bray in terms of the findings. We're happy with the progress that has been made so far and very extremely excited that this project started and we are now seeing the progress and some of the fruits. Of course, we cannot deny the fact that there are areas of improvement that we still need to work on. But thank you very much, Ms. Bray, for the presentation. Also, Dr. Kiwi from DHET, thank you very much for being part of these engagements. Let me also thank the very last speaker, Mr. Buthelezi, for providing the way forward. I think you've summed up everything from the key findings that we have been presented with today, but also chanted the way forward as to what needs to be done from now on.